guys, welcome back to another episode of the Confused Millennial Podcast. I'm Rachel, your host and the blogger behind theconfusedmillennial.com, and this is a podcast all about helping you embrace more of who you are while navigating this whole adulting thing. And today is a very special episode. It is about our birth story. We had our daughter.
Heyo.
Oh yeah, Eric's joining me.
What's up, world?
I don't know if you just heard her. She let out a little whimper a second ago. No, we're not like abandoning her, but if we have to pause or run off at all, it's because she's napping and just in case she gets up. Yeah, but anyway, we are super excited. We had her a couple of weeks ago. And well, first of all, I'm excited because this is the first time I'm like recording a podcast in months because everything's been pre-recorded so I could have a quote unquote maternity leave. And
how's that working out for you?
It's not really working out for me at all. What's it called? I had like pre-written a ton of the blog content all the way out through April. I had pre-recorded all the podcast episodes all the way out through April. I felt super good about it. And then as a lot of you guys know from Instagram, baby girl came a lot later than expected.
Yeah, she did.
So we had originally gotten the due date of January 9th. The very first time I ever went into a doctor's appointment, they said I was I was already 8 or 9 weeks pregnant. It was
Something.
like 8 weeks.
Yeah, I think it was like 8 weeks.
And according to like the date of the first day of my last period is how they gave us that due date, which is how most people get their due dates. And I remember when they gave me that due date, I was like, that's way too soon. Like, they're like, don't worry, the time will, like, it'll get here a lot sooner than you think. I was like, but that's exactly what I'm worried about. That sounds way too soon because it was June 1st at that point. And I was like, you're talking about like 6 months from now. Like, I'm going to have a baby. Like, what? And we went in a month later because at that point you only go in every 4 weeks. And so at that point I would have been 12 weeks. And when they put like the fetal heart monitor on my stomach, they couldn't hear the baby's heartbeat, but I was still pregnant. And so we were meeting with a different doctor in the practice and I had never met him before. This was back when I wasn't sure if we were going to do a home birth. There was still a lot of questions of who was actually going to be our labor team, our birth team.
Where we wanted to birth, who the team was going to be, how we were going to approach everything. Yeah,
and he kind of had just rubbed me the wrong way with some of his answers to my questions, where it was just more so like saying anything to like...
In hindsight, it felt, I liked his demeanor, but in hindsight, it felt really salesy.
Yeah, like Eric walked out of there and the doctor is awesome. Like we went to the same college, super personable, like really friendly, somebody that you'd probably want to hang out with. But when I was asking like those specific questions, it just felt very much like it didn't click with me is the short version. So he had said, I'm changing your due date to January 15th. And so whenever people had asked when's the baby due, we would always just say mid-January. And that was kind of that because we obviously didn't know. And, the beauty of having 2 due dates is when the first passed, I wasn't technically 42 weeks. I was 41 weeks when we had her, or if she would have come early, if you have an earlier due date, she's not necessarily considered premature. So like there was a lot I liked in having these 2 due dates. It felt very non-stressful, although it seemed to stress a lot of other people out.
Yeah, it stressed more people out than us.
Because, when we started telling people, like people sometimes wouldn't settle with mid-January. They would want to know the actual date we got. And so I remember Eric telling a friend January 9th, and they're like, oh, so you could have a baby in December. And I was like, no, my insurance is awful this year. I better not have this baby in December because it's going to cost us like $14,000 if we have this baby in December. And so I was like, just get to January 1st. Oh, there she goes. So we may have to pause real quick and go check on her, but it looks like she's going back to sleep. So we ended up, I remember just like getting to January 1st. I was like, she's not coming anytime soon. January 9th came, and I kind of liked the idea of January 9th just because it was my dad's birthday, and she's named after my dad.
And I like January 9th because of 1919.
Yeah, and there was like, I still wasn't ready for it to be 19, to be completely honest, because we decided to buy a house on January 3rd.
Spontaneously.
Small purchase. No big deal.
Yeah.
very oops, like how did this just happen? So from 1-3 to like 110, we were constantly running around with inspections, visits, getting mortgages together. Like I was really okay with it not being 1-9. And we kind of were joking, like she's waiting for us to get all this stuff taken care of so that when she's here, we can solely focus on her. And I had always thought it was going to be 112 with my Saturn return, hitting 0 degrees in my chart from 112 to 114. And so when 112 came and there was 0 signs of labor, my heart sunk a little bit.
Yeah, I know.
And I was like, okay, you know what? 115, not a big deal. But on 112, I got the date 121. And I hadn't told anybody. We went into our midwife's office for like my appointment because at this point I was like considered 40 weeks. So I had to get ultrasounds every week at that point to make sure like the placenta wasn't deteriorating. There was enough amniotic fluid, that everything was okay. And it was still like good for her to be inside of me. And everything was checking out great. And I remember 115 came and went. And I was like, okay, I'm not stressed. I got this random date like whispered to me as 121. I'm fine. 117, I started to lose. I don't know what happened at 117, but I started to get like nervous. Like she was never going to come out.
Yeah. You started going back to that like 1-9 date and freaking out that like you were already late. What if that was supposedly the date and then you would be so far late and you didn't want to be induced and you just started.
I didn't want to be induced, and work started to get to me because like all of a sudden I thought, you know, these last 2 weeks I had a bunch of sponsorships that happened to be during that time frame, and I had planned their dates for later in January because I thought she would have been there by now. And so now I was like, okay, well now I'm going to have to be posting on social media. I mean, all the content was pre-written, pre-shot. I just literally had to copy and paste and hit publish. But I was like, okay, so that means I'm going to have to be in my inbox for first 2 weeks. And like, I'm like, okay, I'll figure this out. It'll be okay. But I started to get nervous because all of a sudden 117 became 120. And I'm like, there's like 11 days left in this month. And then 120, you woke up that morning and it was the morning of the super
Blood moon, wolf moon thing.
And you were so giddy.
I was.
Like, I remember I just wanted
to... It just seems a convergence of all things powerful. Her being on the cusp, the super blood wolf moon. I was like, this is awesome. And the fact that her middle name is Moon.
Yeah. And I remember I just wanted to punch him in the face that day. I was like, she's not coming today. I don't know why he's so excited. And we like went up to Restoration Hardware in West Elm and did all these different things that day. Oh, fun fact, that day too, if you guys have been keeping up with the family updates, a lot of you guys know that I hadn't been talking to my moms for probably, 5 months, 6 months at that point?
Yeah.
I opened our garage to get in the car to go to Restoration Hardware that morning, and who walked into my garage other than her? So my anxiety level shot through the roof. I was kind of just stunned, and I mean, my nervous system went on overdrive.
But she handled herself extremely gracefully. It was very beautiful to watch.
I appreciate that. But my body definitely reacted.
Yes.
And so I actually do think she would have come on 121, but I started spinning out. You know, we went to the stores, but I was just like holding my breath that entire day. And then the full moon happened.
We went to the beach.
We went to the beach that night, and it was great, us and Tucker. And
the good news, selfishly, for me, in this little period we're discussing right now, is I got to squeeze in a few extra Chinese meals.
Oh, yeah, because I was like, I didn't actually think Chinese food was going to put me into labor, let's be honest here. But I was like, you know what, I know Eric loves Chinese. And I just don't like, this is how you can tell when I'm in a bad like place emotionally, is like all I want to do is eat like Chinese food, greasy foods.
Which creates quite the dilemma for me. Now, you've never said that to me before.
Oh yeah. Well, you know it. Whenever I had like a bad day at work, we were guaranteed to have like pizza, a calzone,
that's true.
Chinese food. Like,
I just don't want to associate Chinese food with bad mood. It's a beautiful thing.
But I'll tell you, if I'm at a place where I'm like, yeah, we can have Chinese food, then I'm really in a place where I'm like, fuck it. Like, I just am not in a good place. Like, that's when I really just don't, I give zero fucks about like what's happening, because I'm just like totally in a different mental world at that point.
Okay.
Anyway, that's like my Chinese food tangent. Didn't think it was going to induce labor, but people said it did. So I was like, sure, whatever, we'll have Chinese food. 1:21 that morning, I woke up and I think I just started crying. Like, I had zero signs of labor. I still hadn't lost my mucus plug. If you guys are familiar with what happens, like, you're supposed to have this gooey thing come out of you that's like, okay, your cervix is opening, like, things are happening. I still hadn't lost that. I still hadn't felt Braxton Hicks contractions. I still hadn't had any signs of labor. And I woke up that morning and I just wanted to cry because I knew she wasn't coming that day. And I had hoped and hoped and hoped it was 1:21. And what was your experience of that morning?
Oh, on 1:21?
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty gloomy around here. I think I tried to be positive again about her coming that day, and you snapped at me.
I was like, I chewed your head off.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a weird place to be in. You know, so much of me during this time was twofold: for my own protection and for you, which was partly keeping groundedness, keeping the space. And the other thing for my own sanity was compartmentalizing everything that was happening. So I was very grounding but disconnected all at the same time. But within me, I was a little bit freaked out too that she still hadn't come. And you know, obviously it's not necessarily anything on me. I knew that you wanted to do everything naturally. I knew that you wanted to meet our baby girl, and you didn't want to be induced. And so for me, a lot of the fears and thoughts that going through my head is really just making sure you really were going to have the birth that you always wanted.
Yeah. I mean, for me also at that point, because like everyone had said we could have a baby like as early as December or 1/1. And at that point, I'm like, we're 3 weeks into January. Like, there's only 1 week left. What if she's not here till February? And there was another girl whose due date was the day before mine, and she had been induced a few days earlier. And I'm just like, at this point, I'm just starting to get nervous and like wondering if my body even works. Like, just terrifying kind of thoughts were creeping in. And
it doesn't, sorry, I meant to interrupt. It doesn't help that every single day, multiple times throughout the day, whether directly to Rachel or to me, did you have the baby yet? Did you have the baby yet? Is the baby here? And it's like, and these are people where like, man, you should know that if we had the baby, you'd be one of the first people that I'd reach out to. Like, this is just adding to our anxiety and stress.
Yeah. And that, I mean, that's the big piece of advice that I'll tell people. Don't ask somebody, did you have the baby yet? They'll tell you. Because that was like, you know, to that point too, we had been getting, did you have the baby yet, since January 1st. So it had been 3 weeks of fielding those calls, and they started to get more and more frequent after January 9th and even more and more frequent after January 15th. And, you know, I know people are well-meaning in doing those types of things, and they weren't affecting me initially, but then that last from the 17th on, every single time somebody asked, it was like my heart sank, and I'm like, nope, still nothing to report. I'm pretty sure my body's broken. Like, maybe I haven't had any symptoms of pregnancy really, because my body's just not going to work for this, and I'm going to have a C-section. Like, all of those kinds of thoughts started to pop up for me. And like, I would just pray. And so the morning of the 21st, Eric ended up texting Shaman Durek, who was on episodes 14 and 15 of the podcast, and was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And bless him, love him. He said, is Rachel holding on to any anxieties? tell her to lay down, put her hands on the right side of her stomach, and just send energies like of love and that she's ready, and emotional signals that she's ready to the baby. And man, I'm gonna cry right now. Man, when I laid down to do that, like I just started crying hysterically, and Eric did it with me. He ended up putting his hands on my belly too, and like I don't know what I was holding on to, like, because I had felt so ready, and I had wanted her for so long, and I have no idea what it was, but I was just hysterically crying. And then my best friend Natalie, who's going to come on the podcast, because she does Psych K, which is so cool, and like literally in so many ways transformed my pregnancy and postpartum experience. Essentially, like in a nutshell, Psych K taps into your subconscious mind to decondition the beliefs that you picked up in that time before you turn 6, when you're just absorbing the world and like developing your belief systems about like whether you're safe, secure, all those things that you end up in therapy for later on in life. This allows her to tap into that and reprogram it within minutes and even seconds. So it's like years of therapy in like a really short, condensed, like couple minute thing. So she was texting with me like, are you guys okay? Like, what's going on? So I told her what shaman said. And so she went into, it's called surrogation, where she taps into my subconscious mind, and she tested for it. And it was testing that I wasn't ready. So she reprogrammed that belief. And she's like, we'll see what happens. And I'm like, okay, cool. So that was the morning of Sunday morning. And what was it, Monday? Monday morning. That afternoon, my back had been killing me, and I was just like tired. And so I was like, you know what? I haven't had a massage since like June. Let me go ahead and just schedule an induction massage, because I have my midwife appointment tomorrow on Tuesday. At this point, we have to go see the midwife twice a week in pregnancy to make sure everything's okay, and getting regular ultrasounds because I was so far along. And I was like, let me just schedule the induction massage. If nothing else, like I need to relax and I need to nurture my body. And I don't necessarily think it's going to put me into labor, but like, yeah, can you come tonight? So she was going to come at like 8:00 at night on Monday. And then she ended up, I was so emotionally exhausted by the end of the day. She's like, hey, I've just been really like crazy. Can we do this tomorrow? And I was like, yes, please, actually, because I'm nervous that it is going to work and I'm not going to get a good night's sleep after having such an emotionally exhausting day. So we moved the induction massage to Tuesday. And Monday, man, it was like 10:00 at night. I was like, I'm done. I'm going to bed. Fell asleep right away. Got jolted awake at 11:00 at night. And I honestly thought it was just like one of those dreams where like I was falling and got jolted awake. It wasn't until much later on that I realized it was a contraction. So I got up, went to the bathroom, laid back down. An hour later, got woken up again. I was like, okay, I've been having some pregnancy insomnia, if you want to call it that, where I had been getting up a couple nights a week at like 2:00 in the morning and having a bowl of cereal and like taking an hour to go back to bed. So didn't really think much of it still. Go back to sleep right away at midnight. 12:30, wake up again. And then pretty much every 15, 20, 30 minutes, I started waking up that night. And at about 2:30, I was like, you know what? Clearly I just want to be up. Let me go downstairs, have a bowl of cereal, watch an episode of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, and that way I can go back to sleep. Yeah, that's what I did whenever I couldn't sleep. I would have a bowl of cereal and watch 90s TV throughout pregnancy. I got through all Boy Meets World. Now I'm on Sabrina the Teenage Witch. But I came downstairs, had my bowl of cereal, and while I was having my bowl of cereal, I started to notice these pangs in my stomach, and I was like, oh my God, I'm not waking up because I can't sleep. I think I'm waking up because I'm having contractions. I was like, but I think these are just Braxton Hicks, because earlier on Monday, when Eric had put his hands on my stomach and we were doing that thing that shaman told us to do, he's like, Rachel, that's a contraction. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, that's like what I'm feeling is a contraction. I was like, oh, like, no, it's not. Like, I don't know what you're like. And I was like, felt it. I was like, oh my God, yeah, I can see it. I was like, is it a real one or is it Braxton Hicks? And we had no idea. Like, I still hadn't If I wasn't holding my stomach, I couldn't necessarily feel it, but then sometimes I could if I was paying really close attention. So I just still wasn't sure. So even at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm like Googling early signs of labor. I'm like, is this like Braxton Hicks? Is this real? I don't know what's happening. Later on, my midwife, when I shared that on Instagram that I was Googling early signs of labor, she was like, yeah, but you don't call your midwife. So, because I didn't actually end up calling her ever, I realized until like literally
The last minute.
like we'll get there in the story. So I am like, okay, I think I'm having contractions every like 15, 20 minutes. Cool. Like whatever that means. I was like, I better go to sleep in case this really is labor. So I go back upstairs. I go back to sleep. I wake up again every 15, 20, 30 minutes throughout the night. I think around like 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, I get up for the day, which is normal for me. The first hour, I go about my day as usual. I start working. I just am doing the things I normally do.
My mom called to see if you were in labor, and I was like, no, I think she's fine.
Yeah. And well, I was bouncing on my like the bouncy balls that you're supposed to be on like when you're trying to have labor, and like they're just good for you when you're pregnant. So I was bouncing on that, typing on my laptop, and then all of a sudden, like around 9 o'clock, I realized I couldn't focus on the work I was trying to do. Like that things were getting so intense that like I kept reading the same sentence over and over. And so by like 9 o'clock, I was like, okay, let me text my doula because I think I might be in labor. And that was like the first time I was like, this could really be happening right now. So I texted my doula. I was like, hey, I think I might be in labor. I don't remember exactly what I said, but just wanted to give you like a heads up type of thing. And I had a chiropractor appointment at 10:30 that morning. And I said to him the same thing. I was like, hi, I think I might be in labor. Is it possible?
Well, you also had us go early. That's how uncomfortable you were. You had to show up at 10.
Well, that's where I was going with this. I was like, I think I might be in labor. Is it possible for me to come at 10 instead of 10:30? 10's the first appointment of the day because I like just don't want to be like laboring in a waiting room type of thing. And he didn't respond. So I was like, you know what? It's 5 minutes away. Like, let's just go there. So we went there at 10 and there was another woman in the waiting room and she's like, do you have a 10 o'clock appointment too? And she had a little kid, like had a baby with her. And I was like, technically, no, I have a 10:30, but I'm in labor, I think. And I just really wanted to like get this out of the way so like I could go home and like labor. And she was like, oh my God, take my appointment time. And like she started talking to me and like made me feel just so much better. And so at that point, while talking with her, I was like, okay, I think I'm actually in labor. And then I went back to see Ian, my chiropractor, who's amazing. And he adjusted me and he's like, okay, you're like in great alignment. Like your hips are good to have like a great delivery. He's like, if you need me at all though, like if you need me to come to the hospital, come whatever, like just let me know. I was like, okay, bye, thanks. And so at this point, I'm pretty sure my contractions were like 10, 15 minutes apart. And I had moved the induction massage, like I said, to 11. So we get back home. Eric's making smoothies because I still hadn't eaten anything that day. I called the induction masseuse and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I'm in labor. I don't know if I should have the massage even. And she was like, no, like it's actually great that you're in labor to do the massage now because it'll make things move a lot smoother and quicker. I was like, okay, cool. Like, whatever, because I was trying to like labor at home on the couch and stuff and I was just way too in my head, so to have somebody else there was like, that sounded like such a nice reprieve. I could barely get down the smoothie that Eric had made me. Like I was just, contractions were like definitely at about 10 minutes apart around that point. When the masseuse had gotten here, she was like, have you been timing them? I was like, no. So she started timing them during the massage. So whenever I had one, I would just let her know, and she was tracking it all during the massage. And it was a 90-minute massage that felt like it was 5 minutes. The contractions at the start of the massage were 6 to 9 minutes apart. By the end of the massage, they were about 4 to 5 minutes apart. And I felt very calm and very at peace during the massage. after the massage, I had a contraction. She was like, walk through it. And I had before been just kind of standing through them, and walking through them definitely helped a lot. And within minutes of her leaving, they went from 4 to 5 minutes apart to 3 to 4 minutes apart. And then this is where it got tricky, was that my contractions were only lasting for about 45 seconds, I thought. So the general rule of thumb is you go to the hospital when your contractions are 4 minutes apart, lasting for 1 minute each, and that pattern has been happening for an hour. So here are mine. They're 3.5, 4 minutes apart, lasting for 45 seconds, and that pattern had only been happening for 20 minutes. And the 4 to 5 minutes apart, again, were only 45 seconds long, and that pattern had only been happening for about 30, 45 minutes. So I'm like, okay, technically, like, I don't fit the go to the hospital mold because my contractions are still so short. And what I think looking back is that my pain tolerance is just high. And so I wasn't registering the beginning and the end of the contraction. So at that point, now it's probably like 1:30 in the afternoon.
Yep.
Because yeah, she got here at 11. She left around 1, I would say. And so I called my doula, Samara, who's amazing. I was like, she had already gotten the update from the masseuse, and I was like, things are like picking up even more since she left. It had been about 20 minutes. I was like, they're saying that they're 3.5 minutes apart, lasting for 3 minutes apart. And she was like, why don't you go ahead? Do you want me to come over and labor with you at home for a little while? And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. She was like, why don't you go get in the tub and like see if that helps at all? And like, I'll let you know like when I'm on my way. I'm like, okay. So I get in the tub. We have a jacuzzi tub. So when I wasn't having a contraction, it felt amazing to have the jets against my lower back and stuff like that. But when I was having a contraction, being kind of locked in that space was really difficult. So I got out of the tub pretty quickly, took a shower. At this point, I look at my phone and Samara was like, okay, I'm leaving now. And she was about 20 minutes away.
Can I just interject one thing that's sort of unrelated but related?
Yeah.
So our landlords.
I was going there, yeah.
Oh, you're going there.
No,
we're
go ahead.
sort of in that time frame.
Yeah, this is
when
exactly.
This happened.
Yeah.
So our landlords, as you know, we bought a house. We're moving. Our landlords asked 2 weeks ago or 2 weeks prior to that if they could have come by with somebody at 2:30 that day. So we're like, yeah, sure, whatever. So
I wasn't thrilled about it because I was like, we're going to have a newborn and I don't want these people in our house with a newborn.
Right.
And I'm going to be breastfeeding and looking like National Geographic. I was not pleased.
Yeah.
But if you guys have been following our rental saga this past year, you know that our landlords are not the nicest people.
Right. So at like, I'd say 11:30, it was right around the time that the induction masseuse came.
Yeah.
And I messaged them and I was like, hey, just FYI, pretty sure that Rachel's in labor, so we're either not going to be here or whoever you're coming with may experience Rachel, screaming and wrenching in pain.
Which I wasn't screaming and
she
wrenching
wasn't,
in
but I tried to
lay it on thick.
Right, make it more dramatic. And she's like, okay, thanks for letting us know we have a key, and it's okay if she's there. And I'm like,
yeah, it better be okay. I pay rent there and a lot of it.
like, it's okay if she's there. She won't scare away whoever we're bringing. So right around the time that Rachel was going into the jacuzzi, I had to run Tucker. Because we knew that at this point that she was definitely going to the hospital at some point in the not too distant,
It was no longer
game over. We knew that was happening. So I took Tucker to Rachel and my friends Kier's and Jacques' place, and they all love each other, so it's really nice. Anyway, so I get back just in time before the landlord show up with their guest, who's an architect.
Oh, gosh.
And they need to be going through every single room.
And really slowly.
They're going every room in the house. And I'm like, can you just avoid upstairs as long, the master bedroom, as long as you possibly can? Rachel's in labor. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. how long is this wall? It's just like really didn't care.
Yeah, no, they literally do not care. So right as this was all happening downstairs, I was upstairs and I texted Samara, my doula, and I was like, don't come here, because she was in the area of where the hospital is and our midwife is. And so I was like, don't come here, because by the time you get here, we're going to be turning around to go right back to where you are. And she was like, why don't you call your midwife and go get a labor check done? And like, don't go to the hospital right away. And I was like, okay, they're literally 2 seconds apart from each other. I'll go do that. So at this point, it's 2:30. I already had my midwife appointment that day at 3:30. So they were like, yep, just come in. We'll work you in earlier. No big deal. I'm like, okay. So we get in the car. We are on our way. Hospital bags packed. Everything's in the car.
Yeah, and let me tell you, anyone who has a husband out there, or just for your own sake, being prepared is so important. It was very non-alarmist being able to just bring the bag. Like when we knew an hour or two before that this was, brought the bags out, had everything we need, the snacks were ready to go, got the dog settled. There was no chaos.
Yeah.
It was very organized.
It was smooth transitions.
Until
we get into the car.
Until we get to the car.
So we get into the car, we are driving. Eric had put in some plastic bags, because my friend who had just had a baby was like, I puked on the way to the hospital. And I was like, well, I puke a lot. So we need bags, and we had towels in the car in case my water broke, because again, my water hadn't broke, but I did lose my mucus plug after the bath, so that felt like a big win. I was like, okay, I'm actually in labor now. Like that was the point where after the bath I was like, this is real. So again, I didn't actually believe I was in labor until I lost my mucus plug, and it was after the jacuzzi, after the induction massage, after all these different things. My contractions were like 3.5 minutes apart. Still didn't believe it. So I finally admitted to myself I was having a baby that day at 1:30 in the afternoon, and now it's 2:30, and then we're on the way to the hospital. And I puke 4 times in the car. And
well, the first one was all over you because apparently I didn't pack the bags correctly.
Yeah. So tip for the husbands out there, or for the ladies, when you are packing your car with stuff and you bring like plastic grocery bags into the car, make sure they're double bagged. I know they were, but make sure that they are double bagged and like opened. So I had one bag open, and then the other bag inside of it was crumpled. So when I just started to puke into it,
it went everywhere.
There was a hole in the first bag, and the second bag wasn't actually open. So then I had to rebag it. So I got puke all over me.
Now, I don't typically get too disturbed by other people's puke, whereas I'm like, there are those people who hear or see somebody puke and they immediately puke. I'm not that, but sitting in the car with the windows up and the smell of puke resonating.
Going 65 miles per hour on the highway.
Right, combined with, that lingering feeling that we're doing this thing, I started getting a little nauseous myself.
So I puked 4 times as we're pulling off the highway for the exit for our midwife in the hospital. And I'm like, just go to the hospital. I can't go to the midwife. I cannot get into a car a second time. Because at this point, too, aside from puking, the contractions were getting more intense. And I was like having to hoist myself up on that little handle that's like at the top side of all cars. So I was like having to kind of like lift myself on the contractions because the pressure was too much sitting in the car. I was like, there's no way I'm getting in and out of a car a second time. Like, go to the hospital. So I texted the doula. I'm like, we're going to the hospital. Didn't tell my midwife or anything. I realized.
I called the office.
Oh, okay. I called the office. So we get to the hospital. There's like a family at the desk, and they're just kind of like talking, and like
it seemed like they just finished a tour.
Yeah, and they were like doing pre-registration. She's like, she's in labor. Can you guys step aside and let her come up? And so I'm like laboring, like pacing back and forth as they're checking us in. And she's like, okay, like they're just getting your room ready for you. Like I'll tell you when to go up in a minute. I'm like, okay. So we get up to labor and delivery. And I walk.
And I have to say, she only cursed at me twice throughout this whole process. One, early in the car ride, when my close college friend called, she looked at me with fire daggers coming out of her eyes and said, "Don't you fucking answer that call." And then the second time, I don't know exactly what you said, but it was when we were in the registration area for the hospital. And I think I went to go ask you something. You're like, "Just fill out the fucking paperwork yourself."
I have no recollection of that.
But that was it. Otherwise, she was super chill.
So then I get into, I think he probably asked me stuff while I was in the middle of a contraction. And so we get up to the labor and delivery room, and what's it called? The room that they initially put us in was directly, like, open directly to the nurse's station. And you have to tell this part because I didn't remember it initially.
Yeah, so, you know, what you do, obviously, you leave your car and you get up to the room. So it took about 15 minutes from the time we got there to getting up to the room. And we get into the room, and we're all just sort of like a little confused as to what's going on. But it was loud right when we walked up. And then, like Rachel just said, the door was open to the nurse's station. And she just sort of casually goes, "You think we could change rooms? I'm a little nervous about the noise. I'm doing hypnobirthing, and this could be a distraction." Just like very nonchalantly. She's like, "I don't want to be a burden. So if you can't, it's totally okay." And so the nurse is like, "Oh, no, we'll see what we got, what we can do." Da, 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 da.
Yeah. So they end up moving into a room at the end of the hall. And
at that time, Samara had showed up too.
Right. And right when we get into that room, Samara walks in. She puts down her doula bag, like turns on music, lets the essential oils going.
And I had to run back out to move the car and bring in
the bags. And ball and all that type of stuff. And there was a labor and delivery nurse that I had really wanted, and she happened to be our nurse. And I was like, "Oh, this is awesome! Like, I'm getting like all the things I want for like my great hypnobirthing experience." And within minutes of being in the room, you know, I was having contractions. Samara like started applying counter pressure while Eric was like going and getting the bags, and things were picking up very quickly.
Yeah, by the time I got back into that room, Rachel was like hunched over, facing the window. Samara's reared up behind her, pressing on her butt cheek hip bones thing to release the pressure. Jack Johnson's playing in the background. And I'm sort of like a deer in headlights. I'm like, what do I do? So I just sat on a couch.
Yeah. So we got there at about 3:15 to give you like, got to the hospital at about 3:15. It's probably 3:30, 3:45.
Yeah.
At this point, I have no idea when my pants came off.
I don't even know. I think they were off when I came back to the room.
So now it's about 3:45. I still haven't gotten into a hospital gown. My water still hasn't broke. And the contractions are starting to get really intense where I'm to the point where I'm like, I want an epidural.
Well, I'm going to correct your story. So going all the way back to about 2 p.m.
I was going to say
2:15 is when she started second guessing herself and her strength.
Yes.
And she was like, "Listen, Eric, it's so far late. Like, I'm already so exhausted. Like, I'm just going to get the epidural."
Yeah.
And so it started then, and then...
But, like, hold on. Pause real quick there.
Yeah.
At that point, that was before we left the house, and I was already thinking about the epidural. And for me, at that point, I was so mentally drained from the last few days.
Yeah.
From the unexpected visitor on the 20th to it not happening on the 21st and that big emotional release. And I was emotionally done at that point. Like, I was not in the emotional or mental place that I had expected to be on my birthing day, if you will. And I was just like, I'm done. Like, I think like I'm gonna want the epidural. Like, my water still hadn't broken. I had no idea when this baby was actually going to come. I had a friend the one that had puked on her way to the hospital, she ended up being in labor for more than 24 hours and her labor kept stalling. Not that mine had any signs of stalling at that point. But I just didn't know how much longer. So at that point, though, when I was saying, and then I remember in the car on the way to the hospital, I remember going to Eric and being like, "Remind me again why I don't want an epidural." And his response was so beautiful. And like it gave me the strength where like I didn't get to the hospital and immediately ask for one. And I held on to that for a while. And, but at this point at the hospital, I was like, done. I was like, I want the epidural. And Samara was like, when I was in a contraction, I was like, I want the epidural, get that ready. And then not in a contraction, Samara and Eric would talk sense into me, and they'd be like, why don't we try the nitrous oxide gas first and like see if like the laughing gas takes the edge off. And I'm like, okay, that sounds fine. And then a contraction would come, and I'm like, you're getting that epidural already, right? And then it would pass, and they were like, gas, yeah, let's do the gas. And I'm like, yeah, that sounds great, like I really don't want an epidural. And
Yeah, and then she was like, that's it. I'm getting the epidural. And as she was screaming that...
Hold on before you get into that. So at that point, I was like, can somebody, Samara was like, do you want them to check you? Where they do like a vaginal exam to see how dilated you are. Because at that point, I hadn't had a check in over 2 weeks. I had no idea how far along anything was. So the labor and delivery nurse checked me, and she was like, my water still hadn't broken. So she was like, your sacks are so full, it's kind of hard to give like an exact.
We can break your water for you.
We can break your water for you if you want. But like, I'm thinking that when you are not having a contraction, you're 4 centimeters. And when you are having a contraction, you're about 6. And I'm like, okay, man, I know people that got epidurals at 9 centimeters. Like, I'm 4 to 6. That's still quite a way till 9. Like, get me that. So that's when I was like, I want the epidural, get me the epidural. And as I'm like shouting that to what Eric just said, I am like, I get off the birth ball, and I'm like, I just remember screaming, I'm gonna poop at the top of my lungs. And everyone kept telling me like, when you are about to have the baby, it's just like this overwhelming urge to poop. And I'm like, well, I don't know what that feels like. This may be TMI for you guys, but like, I go to the bathroom very easily, where like I don't necessarily feel that urge to poop. Like I just go to the bathroom, and that might be TMI for you guys, but like I didn't think I would ever know what people were talking about when they said that. And I just stood up from this birth ball and just shouted that at the top of my lungs. And as I shouted, Samara's like, that's okay. Like, it's good. That's good. Like, it's okay. Just keep breathing. And as I bend over the bed, and literally like a scene out of a movie, my water just gushes all over her feet and all over the floor, like straight up scene out of a movie. I look down. I'm like, oh my gosh, it happened. My water finally broke.
Yeah, meanwhile... You know, the nurses are in the background, and she's all distracted. They're like on the phone with the midwife being like, you need to get here like yesterday. And then the midwife's like, yeah. Well, I'm on my way. I'll be there soon. They're like, no, you don't understand. Like, the baby is coming. So now.
So I get up into the bed at this point, and I kind of like I'm on my hands and knees with my face facing the back of the bed, with my arms and head kind of like over the top of the bed. So, and I like start breathing and having contractions there. And probably the first contraction I had up there, somebody shouted, I see hair.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Samara.
I'm like, wait, what? Like, I literally, like, my water broke like 2 minutes ago. You see hair? Like, what is happening? And so I'm like, can I touch it? And they're like, because I didn't believe it. And I never thought I would, like, because I had heard.
Well, you asked to touch it. It was a little bit after that you asked to touch it.
Because I didn't believe.
You switched around facing forward when you touched it.
No. Not the first time, because I went and touched her twice, because like I still did not believe that it was happening. So I touched her head, and I could feel her hair. I was like, oh my God, this is actually happening. So I stayed in that position for a few minutes. My midwife walks in when I'm in that position, and I just hear her go, the janitor was about to have to deliver this baby. And I'm like, oh, she's like, I'm here. I'm like, hi, nice to see you. I'm like, I have no idea what's going on. So quickly realized like that position was not like going to work for actually getting the baby out for me. So they put up the squat bar and a rebozo, which is just like a piece of fabric that hangs over the squat bar. So if you can imagine, like if you were sitting on the ground doing a crunch with like what are those bands called? The TRX bands?
I was just gonna say, it's like TRX bands
that kind of hang from the ceiling. So that way, when I was having a contraction, I would pull down onto it, and I would literally do a crunch, was essentially what was happening at that point. And so I did the first couple were kind of challenging, where I was like, I don't know if like this is working. In hypnobirthing, you're supposed to breathe everything in and out through your nose. And that was really not working for me at this point. And you're supposed to do this like J breath where you turn your spine into a J to move the baby out and down. And so I was trying to keep my breath in and out of my nose, and that was really difficult and it wasn't working. And at this point, Reagan's head was like half in, half out. And I totally freaked out because I was like, oh my God, is she trapped? Because like when I was doing a crunch, I could look down and see everything happening very easily. I was like, oh my God, is she stuck? Am I hurting her? So like one contraction, I like lost any pushing momentum because I just freaked out if she was okay. And then, like, I remember my midwife, Courtney, she was just like, you have to let go of the fear. And then I hear Samara, and she's like, breathe it out through your mouth, like, blow it out. And I see Eric, and he's just like, you're doing great. And I'm like, okay, I got to stop freaking out and, like, use this next contraction, like, really use it. So the next one, like, I pushed and got, like, I don't think I got anywhere. I was like, okay, one more time, like, you're gonna do this. And like that one, her head came out, and then the next one, her whole body just shot out and
literally shot out.
yeah, I was like, oh my God, it just happened. Oh my God, is she just shot out? Is she okay? What's happening right now?
Yeah, I am so glad they didn't have me. I would have dropped the baby.
I mean, the baby, like,
I know it
you
drops
can't really
onto
drop
the
on.
table, but like, I was not expecting her to shoot out the way she did.
Yeah, she shot out.
So I was very involved in the whole birth process.
Yeah.
And listen, like, it is by no means a pretty scene, right? But like,
I think it was beautiful. I watched the video multiple times.
Yeah, no, it is beautiful. That's what I'm saying. It's not pretty. Like, it's not pretty. It's a miraculous thing. Okay, there's a difference. But to your point, these guys who say, now there's guys who have squeamish stomachs, so maybe we'll give them a pass for those people. But like these guys who say like, I couldn't look down there, I couldn't be part of it, it's gonna ruin sex for me for the rest of my life. Like, that is such horseshit. Like, such garbage. There was actually only one really thing that kind of freaked me out, which is just when she had the one curled up piece of hair sticking out.
Oh yeah.
That was the only thing that like freaked me out.
Because her head is, because the head's soft, and so it looks kind of deformed.
Well,
initially.
that was the thing that. So this was nothing to do with your area, more so where I was freaking out. So when the baby's head's coming out, I'm like, oh my God, it was completely. It looked like bones from the skull were popping through. The head looked like it was indented in 18 different places, and I'm like, oh my God, we're gonna have a deformed child. Like, I was freaking. I kept a brave face, but like, I had my moment of just like, oh my, I don't know what to do. Like, and then it passed.
Yeah.
And we learned exactly what actually happens in that situation and why.
I already knew, but I didn't tell him.
I didn't know. So, but man, it has nothing to do with sex. I mean, this was a beautiful experience to be part of the birth, to see the strength and power of my wife go through this. For anyone who knows about hypnobirthing, Rachel ran a clinic on how to do hypnobirthing. I mean, she stuck with everything she knew and learned and practiced, and listened to me and the midwife Samara. I mean the doula Samara. Anytime she was straying off and beginning to scream or tense up, she brought herself right back. And then to watch your child come into the world, that's beautiful. I mean, it doesn't ruin sex. The one thing has nothing to do with the other.
Yeah.
And so, not shaming any guys, but for any guys whose wives are pregnant, any guys who will have a baby in the future that haven't yet, like, dude, you should absolutely be part of the birth. It's an amazing thing. It's a bonding experience between everyone. And man, I'm so grateful that I got to participate and feel a part of that.
I am too. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I was like so good at hypnobirthing because like I felt like I wasn't at all. Because I had such a choppy day from the chiropractor to the massage to the tubs, to thinking I was going to the midwife, to thinking I was going then to getting to the hospital, to switching rooms in the hospital. Like, I was never in a place for more than an hour where, in hypnobirthing, they give you meditations, they give you affirmations, and like really getting you into this super calm trance. And I was never anywhere long enough where I felt like I was settling. I never, like, my contractions moved so quickly from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2, where I just didn't feel like I ever actually truly was calm. And then there was one point when one of the final pushes, it was like after the one where I had my mini meltdown and I was getting my head back in the game. And I remember like a nurse came in who I think was there specifically for the baby. And because I'm not medicated, I'm fully aware of everything happening. I remember I was like holding down the rebozo and I just screamed, "Fuck," at the top of my lungs. And this woman walked in the room and her eyebrows shot up like to the top of her forehead and her eyes were popping out. She was like, "Oh my God." And I was like, "Oh my God, I'm that person that people talk about in the hospital that had a natural birth next to them and how terrifying it sounded right now."
But not at all. The reality is she let out one, like, I don't even remember that. That's how not loud it was.
Yeah.
Like, you really didn't scream.
But to that point, like, I kind of want to bring that up because when I would tell people I wanted to have a natural birth, they're like, "You're crazy. Like, nobody chooses that. Da 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 da." And man, I am so happy I did choose it, and that, like, I know I was asking for the epidural and gas and all these different things, but like, I'm so happy I didn't end up having any of those things.
And what's really cool, sort of off track, you manifested so much.
Yeah, down to our labor and delivery nurse that was in the room with us.
You straight up said, I want to be in and out, not of the hospital, but like in and baby out in 2 hours or less
at the hospital.
And at the hospital, and it happened.
Yeah, and so we got there at 3:15. She was born at 4:49. So it moved very quickly, as you can tell. And but what I was saying was, like, if you do hear anybody, because like people would be like, I heard people next to me that were doing that and it just sounded awful. Like, hypnobirthing really teaches you that it's not, the pain we the quote unquote pain that we associate with childbirth is learned pain. It's what has been imprinted into us in when we watch movies, when we watch TV. We're taught that this is how we're supposed to respond without medication, by screaming and all this type of stuff. And I mean, and
it actually tenses up the body and slows the process down.
And it can actually tense up the body and slow the process down. So like, that was one of the things I had done Psych K on, which was like that I didn't need medication and that my body easily like relaxed and things like that. And so, despite the fact that my internal dialogue was like justifying and wanting it, like the reality was I really, really didn't need it. And everything was happening exactly how I spoke it out to happen. Getting into the hospital and having her in under 2 hours was exactly what I wanted. And so after she shot out and they handed her to me, I was so confused because like I was expecting her to have like the vernix whatever that stuff's called.
Look blue. And
no, that's not what I was talking. No, that's not.
Nothing? Okay.
Maybe the mucousy part, but it's this like white waxy cheese like substance that's supposed to be on babies when they're born, and she didn't have that. I thought she'd be like blue or yellow. She didn't have either of those. She was just pink and like healthy and like amazing. And they put her in my arms and I was like, oh my God, what is happening right now? But I won't lie, it wasn't like this moment where like you hear people be like, my heart grew 2 sizes, everything in the world shifted for me. Like, I didn't have that moment. I was just like, she's mine. I get to keep her. She's here. Is this really happening? It was very much like my labor experience. Like, is this really happening right now? Is this like a dream? Is she actually mine? Nothing's gonna happen. Like, she's okay. She's breathing. Like, everything's fine. Like, really? Everything's fine? Like, it was more just like going through this checklist of like, oh my God. And, within her, they put her on me and within minutes, she had already pooped. Then she pooped again in my hand as I was holding her. So then they cleaned all that up. And then she pooped again in my hand and they cleaned all that up. And then she peed in my hand. So like within the first 10 minutes, she had pooped 3 times and peed. 2 of the poops were on me. 1 of the pees were on me. So I was like, okay, welcome to the world, Reagan Moon. And so in case you missed the blog post on her name, Reagan, the R is from my dad and the M is from my grandpa. And I'll link the blog post there if you want to learn more about her name. And I mean, it was just wild. And so for the first hour at the hospital we deliver at, the baby is skin to skin with mom, and you breastfeed in that hour too. And yeah, so that was kind of all that. Honestly, I'm so sorry. And we should talk about this too, because I just realized, when did you actually get to hold her for the first time? I've never even asked you that.
I don't think for like 5 or 6 hours.
It wasn't after you got food and everything.
Yeah, that's why I said it was like 5 or 6 hours. Like I don't think I even held her until like 9 o'clock that night.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm so
Maybe
sorry.
later.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, so it's funny. No doubt, like we both already loved our daughter before she came, and I make no secret about it, but there's always that element of disconnect, right? Like physically I'm not the one holding her or carrying her and building this relationship with her. And every guy I spoke to who had a child said they agreed, they sort of had that disconnected feeling, but the minute they held their child, it was like game over. And I don't know if it was because I was sort of just sad and, felt like put off to the side. And it sounds sort of funny to say, right? Like, because, your wife and the baby have this like 9-month bond, and now they're meeting for the first time, and you certainly don't want to get in the way and make it about you. But like, I definitely felt like an outsider. And
I wanted to bring that up because I if you guys had listened to other episodes where we talked about this, I had really considered a home birth, and I would say like I was so nervous about the hospital staff intervening during my pregnancy, and I had a friend that did a home birth and a hospital birth, and she had the exact labor team that we had and everything. Actually, her home birth was 2 doors down from us. And she said what made that so special was how involved her husband got to be. And I didn't fully understand that until that first night with Reagan. And Eric had just like, I could tell like there was something off. And we had to have a really long talk. And I realized in that moment like how much dad does get pushed aside in the hospital. Like, between having the nurse constantly moving the monitor down on my stomach, there's hands there's somebody on both sides of the bed of me, there's somebody at the foot of the bed of me.
Well, I was very hands-on during the birth.
Yeah.
It was after the birth.
After the birth, it's just,
there's just, first of all, it's not comfortable. There are constantly people coming in and out to check on you, to check on the baby. And it was definitely surreal to hold her. I didn't have this overwhelming, like, that's it, feeling like my life is altered in the best or any way possible. And honestly, it didn't, even going into the next day at the hospital, still didn't click. For me, it wasn't until we got home and I sat on the couch and you put her on me, and I had my first real, like, single solitary moment with her that I was like, okay.
Well, I want to... Oh, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Yeah, no, just like, okay, I'm starting to get it.
I mean, but I think that also goes back to, like, the hospital thing, because I had put her on you. The hospital had pull-out bed couches in the rooms that were pull-out beds. And so what had happened... Eric didn't realize, even though I had him pack his own hospital bag, he didn't realize that he was sleeping at the hospital with us.
I thought, yeah, we were going to talk about this. I thought that because we heard so many stories about people laboring for 24, 48, and even 72 hours. I was like, oh, okay, so the father only sleeps at the hospital in the event that the labor is extending overnight. I didn't realize that I sleep at the hospital after the baby's born.
Yep, you do. So part of the reason why you holding her took so long is because he ended up having to he had to go run home, and he went and picked us up dinner, and so I got moved from labor and delivery into like the actual postpartum room during that time, and traffic was a nightmare, so he was gone for longer than expected.
Yeah.
But I put her on you in your bed there, but it's still like you could just tell so much felt like being a guest to your own child's birth.
Yeah, totally.
And so I think like, yeah, having her home was a big shift. And like for me, I wrote about this in the blog post version of this birth story, but there was a point about halfway through the pregnancy where when they were doing just the regular fetal heart monitor check, she had an arrhythmia, so an irregular heartbeat, and I completely broke down and panicked. Like, what did that mean? We had to go see like a cardiac specialist, or we were supposed to. And I remember we left that midwife appointment after hearing their irregular heartbeat, and I just could not stop crying. And I was like, did I do something wrong? I'm failing as a mother already. And so for me, that was the big shift of like my world, like when something was potentially quote unquote wrong, and I just couldn't help her. There was nothing I could do. Like everything was out of my control, and I felt completely crushed. So that felt like my big shift when I was pregnant. And then I felt like that shift happened even more during those last few days when like she just wasn't coming and I couldn't understand why. And even like when Shaman said, is Rachel holding on to something? Like she has to emotionally signal that she's ready. And then I was beating myself up. I remember when I was crying during that, I was beating myself up. I was like, she's been ready for weeks, I bet. And like, I've been keeping her trapped in here. And like, I was beating myself up over that and feeling like I was already failing as a mom there. So when I actually held her, I didn't have that overwhelming shift. I had moments up to that point, and it's just like, it was so surreal that she was actually there. So I just kind of wanted to throw that out there because like, if the heavens and seas don't part for you, like,
it's okay. It's not black and white.
No.
And like for me, if that stuff happens to those other guys, that's fantastic. I actually kind of really love how it's playing out for me, because every day my love for her grows a little bit more and more and more, which is beautiful because it just means that I have so much more love to give and gain and grow. It's not like maxed out day one. And with every passing day and every new thing I learn about her and every new thing that she continues to evolve into, it's beautiful. I just feel more and more of a connection. And yeah, it's, it's beautiful.
And like for me at the hospital, I didn't feel some crazy, I mean, like I loved her. I felt, obviously I have to take care of her and things like that. But to be completely honest, looking back on it, in a lot of ways, I almost felt like I was babysitting. Like, because I had taken care of newborns and stuff over the years, and like the nurses were coming in and they were like, is this your first? Because like how I handled her didn't seem like my first by any means.
The staff was definitely confused.
Yeah, like, she had a little bit of a tongue tie, and I was having pinching and cracking with breastfeeding, and just not a great experience. But like the lactation consultants really at the hospital didn't spend a lot of time with me. They're like, well, she's gaining weight, or like she's latching, your latch looks fine. Like, there's other people I pretty much have to go deal with because, they can't even get their baby to latch. I mean, nobody said that to me. Let me make that really clear. Nobody said that to me, but like nobody seemed to really care that I was having a pinching, and nobody, our pediatrician, when she looked at her, was like, she has a tongue tie. I was like, that's what I thought. And so that's an entirely different thing, which I won't get into, that we're still sorting through. But basically it wasn't until we got her home where I was like, oh wow, this is actually my child. Like nobody's coming to pick her up, because I wasn't in our house, and like when I look back at it, I really kind of did felt like I was just kind of like there taking taking care of a baby.
Yeah.
I mean, I obviously felt like she was mine, but it wasn't that overwhelming sense of love until, you know, a couple days in. And, you know, one thing about my postpartum, so we got out of the hospital on Thursday. We had her on Tuesday. It wasn't until the following almost a week, 6 days after she was born, did I start having a lot of emotions and did the sleep start catching up to me. I was on such a high. I had so much adrenaline. I had so much energy. And then 6 days after she was born, I woke up that morning and I just looked at her and I was just hysterically crying about how much I loved her and how much I loved Tucker and how much I loved Eric and everybody. And I couldn't stop crying that day. And then, I thought I had popped a stitch because I had a 2nd-degree tear, and turns out I was just healing and having a reaction to the sutures as like everything was coming back together. So my midwife took out the stitches on a week after she was born, that were the little bit that was remaining because they had mostly dissolved, and I started feeling better. But like that week, after when she turned 1 week, from 1 week to 2 weeks, I was emotionally, like, I was terrified. Like, could not stop crying. Didn't have any like thoughts of harm or thoughts of disconnect, anything like that. It was all like, I loved so much. But I was like, it emotionally had kicked my ass.
Yeah, it was a rough week.
And I was terrified that that was never going to end. I was like, is this the start of postpartum? Because like, I felt like I didn't necessarily like have overwhelm, like that big, when somebody had asked me like, what was the moment like they put her in your arms, and I didn't have that big shift moment, and then I couldn't stop crying. I was like, is this the start of postpartum depression? It's not. Everything's okay. But like, I just kind of like wanted to put that stuff out there because that's the stuff nobody had ever told me about. And, you know, it wasn't anything more than just a lot of hormones, and just everyone has a different experience. And
we're also going through a lot of shifts all at the same time.
Yeah.
I mean, we're, you know, between the house, which isn't finalized, and then stuff with my company, you feeling a little angsty about your work that has been sort of put on pause, or not attended to the way that you're used to attending to it. There's just a lot going on all at the same time. Fortunately, though, our baby boy Tucker is obsessed with his little sister.
Yeah.
I mean, literally from almost moment one, he was immediately inquisitive. Anytime she made a sound, he ran over to check on her. He loves to lick her feet, well, any part of the body that she'll let him, or will let him. But he is a very sweet and loving and caring fur brother. Yeah. Fur brother forever.
And she's doing amazing. My experience is very similar to Eric's. Every day I'm just like more and more in awe of her as she becomes more and more alert to, like, it's just more and more fun.
Yeah.
We've been really fortunate. She sleeps amazing. She does
super
great.
Chill.
She's super chill. And so that is the story of how Reagan Moon came into our lives and
our experiences through it all.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't be more obsessed with her. I just stare at her. I spend so many hours a day just staring at her and feeding her,
and I dance and sing to her, and she has me walking up and down many flights of steps. When all else fails, I have to walk up and down steps to soothe her.
And yeah, I mean, we couldn't be happier, and thank everyone for the love and support.
Yeah.
Since we started sharing on Instagram and the blog, and it was definitely a wild ride. And what I would really say to people is like, get really clear on what your vision is, and not so much like, I'm going to have this specific person, I'm going to these different types of things, but like the energy behind the experience you're having. And like, I'll link my blog post to my birth plan. And I think because I had that type of energy of what I wanted, I got to bring in, you know, the specific labor and delivery nurse I wanted, the timelines that I wanted, things like that. And also doing Site K with Natalie, who I'll link also if you guys are interested in booking sessions with her, really made a big shift too. and just making sure like the big thing like we balanced for and I had prayed for like almost every day during pregnancy was that our bodies work together in harmony and everything was just easy and smooth. And
just keep those around you that support and honor the type of birth that you want. And if you're the partner, make sure you are supporting and honoring the person and the type of birth that they want. Doesn't matter if it's natural or not natural or whatever it is. Just make sure you're there and empower them to follow through in whatever decision that they made.
Yeah, and I mean, we had made the decision too where when I went into labor, we weren't going to tell anybody until she was here because we didn't want...
Yeah, I jumped the gun a little bit on the post-birth texting, but...
Yeah, which I think added to some of your disconnect. We're going to talk real quickly about this, and then I swear we'll let you all go because I know this episode's getting a little long. But for our own nostalgia's sake, I'm happy it's as long as it is. But one of the things that like our doula said, like commended us on too, she's like, you know, you guys actually skipped a lot of the quote unquote mistakes that a lot of first time parents go back and regret. It was just us and our labor team in the delivery room. We didn't tell anyone that I was in labor until, you know, she had arrived because we didn't want calls and texts that were pulling Eric away. Like Eric just brought up, I think part of your disconnect at the hospital too came from the fact that like, you know, they call it the golden hour, the first hour where baby's just skin to skin with mom and all that type of stuff. During that time, you know, I think that's when you started texting people that she had come.
Yep.
And so I think that immediately pulled you out also a lot because, you know, we had kind of this idea of this time where it was just going to be us as family. And so by the time like the room had cleared out and like Eric had stepped back in, you know, he had already had all these other conversations and like his head was already in like the checklist of what he still needed to get done to settle in for the night and things like that. Where like going back, I don't want to put words into your mouth, maybe would have waited a couple more hours.
Yeah, I think in hindsight, I probably would have waited until after we had dinner.
Yeah, and got settled
and took care of everything.
Yeah.
Because it, you know, I mean, it also just distracted me. Like you said before, I had to run home. And then after I went home, because where we were ordered from was on the way back to the hospital, I stopped there. But then I realized I left my backpack at home. So I had to run back home. And then there was traffic. And it just delayed things.
It took like 2.5, 3 hours.
Yeah, I mean, I was a mess, and I wasn't a mess because I just went through the birthing process with my wife. I was a mess because I decided to tell anyone and everyone that I've ever known about this news. And you know, again, I think it was I don't know, I didn't know what I expected, but in that first hour, because everyone was huddled around you and I was sort of pushed off to the side and sitting on the couch, I feel like I just got bored and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. Yeah. So it was a way to distract myself and start letting everyone know. But in hindsight, yeah, no, I would have waited till after dinner.
Yeah. Because at that, you know, as much as they have the baby on mom for skin to skin that first hour, they're still like taking her off and weighing her, wiping her feet and wiping poop and pee.
Taking vitals, and people are coming in, and the doula is making sure you're okay, and
it's just like there's a lot of people.
There's just a lot.
And so like there's 3 nurses in the room at that point, and you're like, oh, okay, there's a lot of people. Sometimes 4 nurses were in the room. It's like, okay, this is a lot of people. And so, yeah. So anyway, so that's kind of like one of the things I would say. We stayed at the whole hospital stay. We never had anybody come and visit us, which I actually really liked because the first day at the hospital was brutal. I like lost my shit by the end of the day because every single hour people are in your room bothering you about stuff, telling you to go to this class, doing this test, doing that test. And you know, my schedule was very different than the hospital schedule. So every time that I would get her down, they would be waking her up. She like started vomiting a lot in the hospital. Like every time anyone would hold her, she would vomit. We had Natalie do a balance for that. And since then she's been fine when people hold her, but like she didn't feel safe when people were holding her other than me. And, it was just exhausting. And thankfully we had an amazing nurse that night who like came, did the bath with us for her, like gave us like a working schedule. Like she got me into a good place. And then unfortunately I thought we were getting out first thing in the morning the next day. But I was GBS positive. So it's just like a bacteria that is in your can be in your vaginal canal. It's in 1 in 5 women. And when she was born, so basically when your water breaks, you have to go on IV antibiotics if you're GBS positive, to make sure that the baby doesn't pick up any bacteria during delivery. But she came so quickly that we only got through a quarter of the antibiotic before she was born. So they made us stay at the hospital until she was exactly 48 hours old. So that whole second day at the hospital was just like, I just kept wanting to go all day, and nobody had like communicated that while I'm discharged and good to go, baby has to stay for exactly 48 hours. And so we finally found that out about halfway through the day on Thursday. And we got to finally go home that evening, but it just was like, let me home. And that day was much quieter at least, but I just wanted to go home. So, I mean, do I wish I would have done a home birth? In some ways, no, because we literally would have been delivering a baby in our master bedroom as our landlords were walking through with an architect. So in some ways, no. And in some ways, like, yeah, I would have done a home birth. I'm happy that I had like the safety and security of a hospital.
That's where my head goes.
Especially because, because she was post-term. One more thing. I know I keep saying one more thing and then going on for 10 more minutes. I'm sorry, you guys. Because she was post-term, I forget exactly. I'm going to butcher this because obviously when they tell you all these different things, the first 48 hours, it's overwhelming. But when they're born post-term, they are more likely to, I guess, vomit and have more mucus in their lungs, and in their throat and stuff like that. Like even when she was born, like we were having to like really hit her and like jostle her to get her crying, and they were constantly having to suction stuff out, because she just didn't have that like she just has more of like what's it called. And so they were just wanting to make sure everything was clear. Like she was breathing, but they wanted to make sure everything was clear anyway. So that second night that we were in the hospital, I was breastfeeding her, and all of a sudden she went from pink to blue to purple. And literally as soon as she started to turn colors, I was like, call the nurse. So Eric called the nurse. I took her off of me, kind of threw her down. And the nurse was in the room within 20 seconds. And by the time the nurse got into the room in 20 seconds, she had gone
so fast.
Pink again. And so what we think happened was just like some mucus had gotten caught and like it cleared out really quickly. And so like the nurse taught us like if that ever happens again, like how to flip her over on her back, how to like hit her to make sure everything gets out. But what's it called? So that was super terrifying. So in that sense, like, yeah, I'm really happy that we were in a hospital and had to stay the second night because, we were if she had gotten the antibiotic, we probably would have even stayed the second night. We probably would have gone home right away. So I'm happy because we got to at least go through that at the hospital, because I was terrified after that. I wasn't watching her like a hawk. Like most new parents like watch their babies like a hawk to make sure they breathe. I was staring at her for like 2 hours after that. I was so freaked out. So that was my other tangent of like why I'm happy I did it in a hospital. Everything happened exactly how it was supposed to, but like, yeah, I could see, I don't think home births are crazy. I mean, I didn't think they were crazy to begin with, but like after going through the experience, I think there's a lot more pros to it than I had realized even before, is what I was trying to say in that. So now that we have officially chatted your ears off about how Reagan came into this world and our experiences, thank you guys again for supporting us and listening to us. And
love you all.
If there's any guests that you guys want to see come on the podcast, feel free to send me a DM on Instagram at The Confused Millennial. And I'd love to hear your birth stories and things like that, what you guys wish you would have done differently, and or other questions that you guys would like to see answered on the blog and things like that. So feel free to let me know. And until next time, have a good couple weeks.